Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the nation right here at EST Nation. We got Waldorf here with you. Got a great show for you guys today. A lot of different topics. We're actually going to get in-depth into Trump's phrasing. I was going to say phrasing. We're going to talk about, in-depth, Trump's new pick for the Supreme Court. Well, I'm not going to give it away. But a lot of you probably already know. We've got that. That's a pretty big segment that we have of the show. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. But first, we have some other news to talk about, including a pardon that happened today. Rudy Giuliani, an interesting report on what Giuliani has been up to while defending Trump. It's going to actually be very relevant, I believe. And then, of course, we will also be talking about another person calling the cops on a black person, on a black person at a pool. Again. But this time, we've got some consequences. Interesting. Okay. So that's our rundown. Again, we're going to go in depth talking about the Supreme Court nominee, including both Republican and Democratic reaction to it, which I think is going to be interesting as well to see how the politics of this unfold, because that's what we do here. We analyze politics. Now, before I get into it, before I dive into the stories, if you could please like and share this stream, that helps us out. So please do that. Also, if you want to support the show, there's a couple ways that you can do it. For one, please subscribe. That's really, really important as well. Aside from that, super chat. If you have anything to say, like if you have, for example, any comments or suggestions or anything that you want to say, share, please use the super chat. That helps us out a lot. Not only that, but you can become a patron, patreon.com/DYTNation. So, okay. We're going to dive into the stories now. We'll start out with a little bit of breaking news. All right. So earlier today, among the news of Donald Trump's new Supreme Court justice and the reaction to that, we have a pardon. Oh, interesting. Okay. So Donald Trump issued actually a couple of pardons to some ranchers in Oregon. So, look, why is this big news? Look, Donald Trump's been doing pardons here and there. He's actually done a fairly good pardon, that he worked on with Kim Kardashian. So what's controversial about this one? Well, let's get into the details, and I will explain why. Now, the two men receiving the pardons are Dwight and Stephen Hammond. That's a father and son duo who, again, they're just simple ranchers in Oregon. Why the media scrutiny? What's so wrong with this one? Well, it turns out that they were imprisoned back in 2012 for arson on federal land. Now, that arson and the subsequent imprisonment based off that arson actually led to something a lot more sinister. It actually led to the armed takeover of the federal wildlife refuge, which was led by Ammon and Ryan Bundy. So that kicked off the Bundy Ranch standoff. Oh boy. So, yeah. So this is significant. Now, look, let's be clear. These guys were not involved in the Bundy standoff because they were in court or in jail. But it's what their imprisonment actually led to that because, the goddamn government overreach. Well, that was a problem apparently Dwight and Stephen Hammond also had with the BLM. Now, let me get into more details, of course. But first, you guys remember the standoff, right? That was when anti-government right-wingers were aiming, like they were literally aiming guns at police officers. And actually, I believe there was a shootout later on. Not at the actual ranch, but when they tried to go and take over another county in Oregon. It's crazy. Where are the law and order people, by the way? This happened during the Obama administration. What happened to the law and order people? Nobody brings it up. Except to, of course, go and defend the ranchers and say that big, evil, tyrannical government. This is why we need our guns. Oh, Jesus. So, anyway. Now, in his pardon of the Hammonds, the president noted that jurors, quote, dropped most of the original charges against them, even as they found them guilty of 2 arson charges. And I'm going to explain in detail what those charges were. He also said that Hammond's 5-year prison sentence was part of an overzealous prosecution by Obama administration officials, while calling the Hammonds devoted family men and respected contributors to their local communities. Now, as usual with any Trump tweet, you have to, or statement, you've got to look for inaccuracies, and there were a couple. For one, arson charges actually mandate or carry a 5-year mandatory minimum sentence. So if you are convicted of arson, you automatically get 5 years. That's what both Dwight and Stephen Hammond ended up serving, or at least serving most of. I believe Stephen had been serving 3 years and Dwight had served 4, if I recall correctly. So, okay. And the reason that they have that mandatory minimum is that, look, if you intentionally go around setting fires, especially out in the West, well, that can cause some serious damage because that place is already plagued with wildfires. Now, wildfires, of course, ravage the area. They destroy crops, they destroy houses, they endanger people's lives. And so, yes, you got to have a kind of a stiff penalty, especially if you're going and starting those fires on purpose, especially without telling people, right? So that law was on the books, and so where was the overzealous prosecution by the Obama administration? Well, I guess Trump thinks, and these right-wingers think, well, they should just let him go. I mean, go ahead, start fires, do arson, we don't care. It's BLM land anyway, it's the government. No, 5 years I think is actually fair. Now, as far as respected, yes, he's actually correct on that one. Apparently they are respected in that local area, but they shouldn't be, and here's why. According to court documents, witnesses at the trial, including a relative of the Hammonds, testified that the arson occurred shortly after Stephen Hammond and his hunting party illegally killed several deer on BLM property. So they were hunting on BLM property, and then they shot and killed a herd of deer. Well, congratulations. So that's, like I said, public land, likely without a license or anything like that, maybe not even within season. Don't care. We're going to kill a bunch of deer. And then they thought, oh, shit, we're going to have to pay for that if we get caught. So here's what happened. Jurors were told that Stephen Hammond had handed out strike anywhere matches with instructions that they be lit and dropped on the ground because, quote, they were going to light up the whole countryside on fire. Lovely. One witness testified that he barely escaped the 8 to 10 foot high flames caused by the arson. The fire ended up consuming about 139 acres of public land and destroyed conveniently all evidence of the game violations. Oh, what? No, we didn't shoot those deer. They just spontaneously combusted. Have no idea. What deer? Whew. Well, that's usually why people commit arson, in order to get rid of evidence. Now, after committing the arson, Stephen Hammond then called the BLM office in Burns, Oregon, and claimed that the fire was started on the Hammond's property to burn off invasive species and had inadvertently burned onto public lands. How sad. Likely story. Likely story. Dwight and Stephen Hammond then allegedly told one of their relatives to keep his mouth shut and that nobody needed to know about the fire. And I take back the allegedly because I'm so used to saying that. But no, but this is actual testimony in court that led to the conviction of these two men. So, look, these guys sound real upstanding, right? Oh, no, wonderful people, devoted family men, and they're respected contributors to the community, in which they nearly burned down. Wonderful. But, hey, that's not the only fire that these two men have set. The 2006 Crumbo Butte fire started out as a wildfire, so there was already a wildfire going on, right? But then there were several illegal backburns that were set by the Hammonds with an intent of protecting their winter feed. Okay, look, if you want to do that, okay, go to the BLM and tell them and ask them, hey, man, look, we want to protect our feed from this wildfire that's coming our way. Can we set some backburns? Did they do that? Of course not. Under the cover of night, they set the backfires without warning to the firefighters that they knew were camped in the slopes above. Now, those same fires threatened to trap 4 BLM firefighters. One of those later confronted Dwight Hammond at the fire scene after he had moved his crews to avoid the danger. 2 days later, Stephen Hammond had threatened to flame a BLM employee with arson if he didn't terminate an investigation into that fire. There was an investigation. The charges were eventually dropped. I'm not sure how. But still, you've got people setting fires, unauthorized fires, putting people in danger, hiding game violations. Look, these guys, this is who Donald Trump just pardoned. They don't care about rule of law. And that's the whole point here. Donald Trump says, I'm the rule of law president. I'm law and order president. I care so much about rule of law. But in his time in office, he doesn't give a damn about rule of law. For example, he recently pardoned Joe Arpaio. Joe Arpaio, again, was told by a court, stop profiling Latinos, stop profiling Latinos. What did he do? He profiled Latinos. And so they're like, okay, well, look, you're obviously not following the law. We're going to have to put you in prison. Donald Trump says, nope. Rule of law? I don't care about rule of law. Come on, Arpaio, get out of prison. Here's your get out of jail free card. Oh, arsonists who actually led to other armed right-wingers going and taking over a federal building? Go ahead. Here's your get-out-of-jail-free card. This is right-wing privilege. This is right-wing privilege for sure. If you're a member of the far right, if you're a sovereign citizen, which these guys were, if you're a neo-Nazi, a white supremacist, Trump just let you know that he is on your side. I mean, if it wasn't clear before, it's clear now. So do whatever you want, guys. It's fine. Both of you, I'm sure, are fine people. I'll just pardon you later on if you do something wrong. Don't worry. I'll bail you out. Look, in one of his rallies, he said, I'll pay your legal fees. That's an actual thing that he said. Oh, don't worry. If you get in trouble by beating protesters, we're going to come back and I'm going to pay your legal fees for you. Which, of course, he would not because he's cheap and he doesn't actually pay anybody. Unless there's maybe an affair or an abortion. But, that's a completely different story. All this does is embolden fringe crazy supporters of his. I'm not saying all supporters of his are fringe and crazy, but there are a lot of fringe crazy people out there. And a lot of them, many of them, do gravitate towards Donald Trump. And this message of do whatever you want, burn things down, just to spite the government or to hide your other crimes, well, that's a message that they just received loud and clear. If you think it's going to get better, but these people, it ain't. Okay. moving on here. Now, there's a new and potentially explosive report that has surfaced about Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Now, according to the Washington Post, the New York attorney is still working with clients through his security firm, Giuliani Partners. Now, what's significant about that? Well, for one, he said, oh no, I'm going to join Trump's legal team, which means I'm not going to be involved with Giuliani Partners. So I'm going to leave that company, and I'm going to go work for Trump because I believe in Trump. Now, the fact that he apparently lied about this is not at all surprising. He's Trump's lawyer. He is basically required through the job to shamelessly lie about everything related to Trump. Now, his clients might be a little bit of a surprise because of who they are, except for this one. The Post reported that one of the clients reportedly is Kharkiv, Ukraine, whose mayor was a prominent figure in the Party of Regions political party. Well, that's interesting. You might have heard about that political party before. It's the one that's actually involved in the prosecution involving Paul Manafort, who happened to be Trump's former campaign manager. Oh, so it looks like Manafort had worked for the Party of Regions, of course, lobbying on their behalf in the United States, or actually towards the EU mostly. And now you also had Rudy Giuliani, who worked for the same people that Paul Manafort worked for. Oh, that must be a gigantic coincidence, though, right? Now, the thing about Manafort and the reason that he got in trouble for this is that he didn't register as a foreign lobbyist. That's something that you're supposed to do. If you lobby on behalf of a foreign power, then we're supposed to at least know that you're lobbying on behalf of a foreign power and how much you got paid for doing so. He did not register. That's why Paul Manafort's in deep shit. And also, if Giuliani has been proven to, and if this report is corroborated by investigators, well, then it's possible that Rudy Giuliani is also breaking the law. So that's interesting. Now, his other client, which is the surprise, is Iranian resistance group Mujahideen al-Haq. I couldn't have gotten that one right. Don't try to make me say it right because I'm going to say it wrong. Anyway, now that group was reportedly labeled a terrorist group in 2012 and is operating in exile. They're known as the MEK. Now, are they labeled a terrorist group by the United States? I'm not entirely sure. It is possible, but certainly they're labeled a terrorist group by the Iranian regime. Now, the funny thing about this, no matter who labels them a terrorist group, they're labeled a terrorist group, and it's just kind of funny to see noun, verb, 9/11, Rudy Giuliani, who hates the terrorists so much, working for terrorists. Oops. He is representing an Iranian terrorist group. Lovely. But that's actually not the biggest issue here. Now, lobbying experts told the Post that Giuliani's work at the firm raises conflict of interest concerns and added that the lawyer's work more than likely requires registration under the Foreign Agent Registration Act. That's FARA. Now, that law, of course, as I mentioned before, requires agents representing foreign powers' interests in a political or quasi-political capacity to disclose their relationship with the foreign government in addition to information surrounding related activities and finances. So, again, oops. What is it with all these Trump's people lobbying or doing business on behalf of foreign governments? I mean, okay, look, globalism, I guess. Congratulations, you're part of the global financial elite, or at least the global elite. I thought you didn't believe in globalization. That's weird. But we know what that actually means. Now, look, as far as registering as a foreign agent, what all these people seem to get, in trouble for is probably one of the easiest things to do, yet nobody seems to be doing it. And it's not like it's something new that we just came up with during the Obama administration. No, this has been in the book since 1938. Everybody knows that if you lobby on behalf of a foreign government, you're just supposed to register. It's the easiest thing in the world. But of course, maybe, I don't know, maybe they're lazy. Maybe they don't want to do it. which is weird because, look, if you violate the law, you can face up to 5 years in prison and a $10,000 fine. That is significant. Now, I guess maybe it's not enforced as much, at least, well, until Trump came into office and Paul Manafort and all that stuff. But I don't know. I don't know the reason. Maybe Giuliani just didn't want everybody to know that he's working for the Iranian terrorist group. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, look, serious crime, serious implications. So now, to be fair, there's no charges yet. So nobody's looking into this quite yet. But we might end up actually seeing something like that happen soon, especially now with these allegations out in the open. So we'll see. Maybe Mueller might be looking into that too, which would be interesting and might lead to Donald Trump possibly having to get a new lawyer again. Hilarious. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We got plenty more stories. We're going to start on our segment of the Supreme Court and the Trump's new nominee. We'll talk all about him as soon as we get back. So if you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. And also, if you have any comments or anything like that, feel free to leave me a super chat. All right. We'll be back in a few minutes. Around the Nation. Welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, QAT Nation. Jeff Waldorf back here with you. Don't have any super chats at the moment or anything like that or any messages, so I will move on. Got a lot to cover, so let's do it. Okay. So last night, President Trump unveiled his new pick to fill in the now vacant seat of Anthony Kennedy. Now, Kennedy, of course, stepped down last month, and there might have been a little bit of a secret deal between Donald Trump and Anthony Kennedy. And I believe we're seeing the fruits of that secret deal right now, because it turns out Brett Kavanaugh, who is a 53-year-old U.S. Circuit Court judge for Washington, D.C., also happened to intern and clerk for Anthony Kennedy. Wild coincidence, right? No, not at all. So, look, I want to go through his policy positions and his different rulings to show you why progressives should be absolutely against this person. And let's start out with corporations. Now, according to Fortune, the White House reportedly sent an email to industry stakeholders Monday night, which is when Trump made his announcement, highlighting Kavanaugh's pro-business and anti-regulation record in an attempt to help to get their help to push through his nomination. So right now, establishment Republicans are like, yes, we love Kavanaugh. He is incredibly pro-business. He's very pro-Wall Street. He's anti-regulation. We love this guy. Now, the extreme right thinks that Kavanaugh isn't conservative enough. So, look, you've got people like Mark Meadows from the Freedom Caucus that are like, I don't know, we don't think he's conservative enough. Can you pick somebody more conservative? But wait a minute. Kavanaugh is already the most conservative Supreme Court, or if he's, of course, confirmed, he would be the most conservative Supreme Court justice on the bench ever. Not conservative enough. Not conservative. Okay, well, again, let me go through his corporate, his stances on corporations. Now, according to Politico, part of the email read, Judge Kavanaugh protects American businesses from illegal job-killing regulations. And not only that, but Kavanaugh helped to kill President Obama's most destructive new environmental rules. Destructive environmental rules. So destructive to what? Remember, we had all these regulations, right? And businesses were still doing incredibly well. Job-killing regulations. But wait, we don't have those regulations anymore. Well, what about jobs? Well, unemployment is down. But the quality of those jobs is not very good. Pay has definitely not gone up. Every once in a while, somebody gets a very small bonus or has gotten a small bonus. But generally, they're not actually creating more jobs. And in fact, thanks to Trump's tariffs, jobs are actually leaving and going other places. Look at Harley Davidson. So anyway, and look, the tariffs aren't even into effect yet for the most part. Now, in his time serving on the U.S. District Court of Appeals for Washington, D.C., Kavanaugh had consistently voted to roll back rules and regulations. He had overruled regulators on cases ranging from consumer protections to net neutrality rules 75 times, and even ruled that the structure of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is unconstitutional. That one agency, that was actually looking out for you before Mick Mulvaney took it over? Yeah. This guy, Supreme Court nomination, right? Somebody who's gotten a nomination to the Supreme Court thinks that's unconstitutional. Oh boy, that's not good. Now, Kavanaugh has also written a number of rulings to cut back environmental regulations implemented during the Obama administration and considers net neutrality to be unlawful. The whole idea that the government says, here are some ground rules. We're not going to interfere. Corporations can't interfere. We've got to let the internet run naturally without corporate interference. And we're not going to interfere either as the government. That's unlawful. Oh, it exceeds the government's mandate. It exceeds the government power. Great. So, look, if you wanted to keep the trend of the Supreme Court being the most anti-consumer court, then Kavanaugh is definitely your guy. Wonderful. Now, if you give a shit about net neutrality as well, again, you're out of luck. Or the environment. Now, moving on, how about social issues, right? In the case of Garza versus Hargan, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals held that an undocumented teenage immigrant was entitled to obtain an abortion without having to obtain familial consent. Now, familial consent is required in several states, but not in a lot of other states. Now, Kavanaugh, of course, had disagreed. He said, is it really absurd for the United States to think that the minor should be transferred to her immigrant sponsor, ordinarily a family member, relative, or friend, before she makes that decision? Well, look, I think that's actually her decision, but nonetheless, because I believe it's her body. Now, but what Kavanaugh is saying is, look, I believe in parental consent rules, and I believe in enforcing them in whatever situation that I deem to see fit, because I am pro-life. Now, that throws up a red flag if you actually believe in safe legal abortion, because, look, if a case comes to the Supreme Court, and President Trump has said overturning Roe v. Wade is one of my biggest considerations in actually picking a Supreme Court nominee, well, then this could be problematic. Very, very problematic for abortion rights, for reproductive rights. Now, it's possible that he could do the same thing in Obergefell, right? Now, Obergefell, of course, is the ruling that legalized same-sex marriage. Or he could even take a look at Griswold v. Connecticut. Now, that decision, of course, forbid the government from banning contraception like it did pre-60s. Now, why? Well, it's because this guy's an originalist. He doesn't think the government has that power. His main thing is interpreting the Constitution as it's written. And that basically means that a substantive due process, the doctrine underneath all those Supreme Court decisions, he contends is illegitimate. And Kavanaugh has used that ruling, that view, in several other governmental regulation rulings. So he's very, very pro-corporate. He's likely to rule against same-sex marriage and abortion rights. And, of course, the ACA. He's a big opponent of that. Now, the ACA has a case that's coming, which will decide whether to keep or rule invalid provisions requiring insurers to cover pre-existing conditions and not raise premiums based on illness or gender. So, but all of that is actually not why Trump picked Kavanaugh. Oh, that's icing on the cake. Because again, Donald Trump loves his corporate sponsors. He loves his friends in business that give him all sorts of money. But the real reason, actually, is this. Writing for the Minnesota Law Review in 2012 in an article titled Separation of Powers During the 44th Presidency and Beyond, Kavanaugh, who had worked on the Ken Starr investigation into Bill Clinton, said his experience working for the Bush White House, which he had gotten afterward, made him realize that being president is far more difficult than any other civilian position in government. Okay, look, is he right about that? Is it a difficult position? Well, unless you're Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, remember, he takes executive time. And he makes sure to do as little amount of briefings as possible. But okay. Now, to everybody else who actually works and does research and reads and makes sure that he is actually doing the things that he's supposed to do as president, it's a difficult job. That's why President Obama's hair turned gray immediately after taking office. But he says it frankly makes being a member of Congress or the judiciary look rather easy by comparison. The decisions as president must make are hard and often life or death. The pressure is relentless. The problems arise from all directions. The criticism is unremitting and personal. And at the end of the day, only one person is responsible. For President Trump, again, it wasn't my fault. It's everybody else's fault. I do no wrong. But anyway, on this basis, Kavanaugh basically believes that presidents should be able to focus their never-ending tasks with as few distractions as possible. So don't distract the president with anything else because he's got a big job to do. Now, can you think of anything happening to President Trump that is considered a distraction by members of the right wing? What happened to be that investigation, that so-called witch hunt that's found quite a few witches, called the Mueller investigation? He said, looking back to the late 1990s, this is Kavanaugh, the nation certainly would have been better off if President Clinton could have focused on Osama bin Laden without being distracted by the Paula Jones sexual harassment case and its criminal investigation offshoots. He argued that criminal investigations are inevitably politicized by both their supporters and critics, and that a president's indictment and trial would cripple the federal government, rendering it unable to function with credibility in either the international or domestic arenas. Even the lesser burdens of a criminal investigation, including preparing for questioning by criminal investigators, are time-consuming and distracting. So understand what he's saying. You shouldn't distract a president who might have broken the law. Hey, look, if he broke the law, you shouldn't go after him for that, because that's distracting. So that Mueller investigation, shut it down. It's distracting the president. It is doing, and an indictment would cripple the federal government. We can't have that happen. We got to have the federal government working, even if the president is a criminal. Now, right here is where I can imagine Trump supporters twisting themselves into a pretzel had Hillary Clinton won the election. Because it would be almost certain that the Republicans would have launched 40 investigations into Hillary Clinton and her private email server and anything else that they could think of. Benghazi, probably. So, it's just sort of ironic when you think about that, and you think about Kavanaugh, who are now being cheered on by a lot of conservatives, saying that, oh, a president, you can't indict a president. You can't indict a sitting president. It's a distraction. He's got to be able to do his job. Interesting. Where's the Law and Order crowd? I don't know where they went to. They seem to have disappeared today. Strange how that happens. But make no mistake, I believe that this is the number one reason why Donald Trump picked Brett Kavanaugh, why he was on the short list. Again, he's got all these conservative positions that are great for the donors. And look, it's a great establishment pick. Mitch McConnell loves him. He says he's superb. He'll be a superb justice. But in reality, this is about Trump wanting the Mueller investigation to go away. This is something that has vexed him since the first day he stepped into office. So he wants it gone. And so he's, of course, pairing up with people or choosing judges that agree that, you know what, you shouldn't go after a sitting president. Yeah, maybe in the long run, when he's not sitting president, that might hurt him. But right now, all he's worried about is while he's president, is about the Mueller investigation, and he wants it to go away. That's my that's my sort of insight into this, and my guess as to why Trump chose Kavanaugh among the other wildly conservative justices that he could have picked. So, and look, all these different reasons and many more is why we should be, of course, fighting against Kavanaugh. There shouldn't be any Democrat. As our good friend Peter Dow, and I never thought that I would say that, says that any Democrat who supports and votes for Justice Kavanaugh to make him a justice shouldn't be a Democrat, shouldn't be in the party. Well, Pete, I'm with you. We got to fight against this guy because, look, the future of a lot of policy is at stake. Okay. Now I'm going to show you if the Democrats are actually fighting back and how they would be doing so. But first, I want to go here to read a couple of super chats. Let's see. Before we get to the next one, read a couple super chats. We have Coffee Crow asks, why is it that the arson and the Bundy BS are government overreach, but Donnie literally says, let's fix the guns before we do a trial, and somehow that's not overreach? This is a Twilight Zone. You know what? There's this thing called, and I'm sure you're familiar, cognitive dissonance, and there is a lot of it going around. So, I mean, look, a Trump supporter would likely hear, he didn't actually say that. Yeah, he didn't say take the guns. Well, look, he did say it, and then he took it back after talking with the NRA. But you talk to somebody about that who's a Trump supporter, they're going to tell you it's fake news. Oh, he didn't actually say that. That's fake news. You know, why? Stop listening to CNN and MSNBC. Okay, man. That's the problem with you know, trying to get through to these people is that sometimes you just can't. Okay. Oh, thank you. I do appreciate that. Platypi. After no deliberation between all the partners, we decided that your hard work needs a bonus. With confirmation from the VP of the Chef Fan Club, Mr. James, we hope you get to buy something nice. Well, thank you. I didn't know there was a fan club. I do appreciate that. Thank you very much. That is, you guys are awesome, of course. And I appreciate it. I really do. So I probably will not get to buy something nice. I'll be paying bills. But nonetheless, I do appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. So now let's get to the show. There is more. Chuck Schumer getting a little fiery here. So recently, President Trump picked Brett Kavanaugh to be the replacement for Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court. It is a controversial choice, to be sure, because Kavanaugh is by no means a moderate. Now, the Republicans are, of course, selling him as a moderate, but he is anti-consumer, very, very pro-business, very pro-corporate, and also shows some hints of being against Obergefell, that's the same-sex marriage rights, and also Roe v. Wade. So there's a lot of concern about what Brett Kavanaugh might do. So in response to that, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is warning Democrats, you better not support Kavanaugh or there's going to be hell to pay. Ooh, getting a little fiery there. I like it. Now, this is according to senior aides briefed on Schumer's message. Now, there is some unfortunate concern that there are Democrats out there that are starting to look at possibly voting in favor of the confirmation of Brett Kavanaugh. Now, this is according to Ryan Grimm, writing for The Intercept. Democratic leadership's response in the 2 weeks since Justice Anthony Kennedy's announced his retirement has been in stark contrast to Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's firm across-the-board rejection of any Obama nominee sent up in 2016. Now, of course, that was a nomination of Merrick Garland. Now, Merrick Garland, I did not like him. He was too moderate. He was too centrist. He was too corporatist. In fact, he voted in favor of keeping money in politics. So that's something that we cannot abide here. Now, nonetheless, Mitch McConnell said, no way, we're not even going to hear him. There's no consideration for this pick. We're going to wait until the American people have a voice in the election. And then we're going to allow a Supreme Court pick to get chosen. Which, of course, later on, we find out that McConnell still would have blocked Merrick Garland well into Hillary Clinton's presidency. That just shows you who the Republicans are. Now, again, Grimm mentions that this is stark contrast to what the Democrats are doing, because the Democrats love to play patty cakes with the right wing. Now, Blumenthal is a good example of that. Blumenthal basically said, and this is Richard Blumenthal, Democrat from Connecticut, said that the Senate should do nothing to artificially delay the nomination of any Supreme Court justice picked by the Trump administration. Oh, we shouldn't delay this at all. No, we should let we should hear the consideration. We should be able to, see what who Trump picks and then vet them. Now, later on, he said, quote, he said that a deliberate process to confirm any nominee would take the Senate until beyond the November elections. So, okay, there's a little bit of a delay, a little bit of moderation of that language because of the pushback he got from progressives. But nonetheless, Blumenthal essentially said, yeah, we're not gonna try and delay it. We're not really gonna fight this. We're gonna roll over and then say, what are we gonna do? What could we have done? We couldn't have done anything. We're just going to let them have an incredibly pro-corporate, anti-abortion judge. And then we can rail against that to try to get votes for the midterms. I'm actually adding that. Anyway. Now. So, look, Schumer comes out fiery, right? He comes out swinging, but is it going to work? How is he going to fight? Well, Schumer told colleagues that reviving complaints about the Garland process would be basically ineffective. Instead, the party needs to attack the nominee specifically. Schumer's team has advised Senate offices, according to Democratic aides who requested anonymity, because they are not authorized to speak publicly. Now, that's so basically their whole plan is, look, go after Kavanaugh because he's an extremist. Now, is that an effective strategy? I'm not entirely sure. I do think, personally, I would go after Kavanaugh for obviously being extreme. I've talked about his policy positions or his decisions in the past being incredibly pro-corporate and all that stuff. But also, there's the whole matter of Republicans basically stealing Merrick Garland's seat out from under it. Somebody who actually probably could have been confirmed because, again, he was a centrist. He's not some huge left-winger, not some big, giant liberal, but a very moderate justice. Okay. Now, as I said before, Republicans blocked that totally and completely. They wouldn't even listen to him or let him even get close to a confirmation hearing. So my response to that is do the same to the Republicans. You want to sit there and block our nominee? We'll block your nominee forever. You will never get a nominee. And in fact, when we get into power, we'll pack the fucking courts. That would be me. But I'm a little bit of a vindictive person. Now, Ryan Grimm argues that that's not exactly quite the way to go. And he bases it on polling. Now he says, it's unusual for Schumer Democratic leaders to eschew an argument about the political process, which tends to be their comfort zone. And he's actually right about that. So whenever Republicans do something untoward using Senate rules, that's when that's when Democrats become lions. Oh, how dare you subvert the honorable process of the Senate. Now Republicans are like, yeah, fuck your rules. I don't care. We're going to get our ways. We're going to steamroll you in order to get that. Again, that's taking a strong position, and I'm in favor of taking a strong position. But Grimm says, but wait, maybe we should actually talk about policy, which then makes my ears perk up a little bit and go, wait a minute, he might actually have a point. Now, in 2016, he uses for an example, Democrats made their argument against McConnell about process, launching a We Need 9 campaign, an ultimately futile effort to rally the American people around the notion that the Supreme Court would function best with a particular number of justices on it. Because it turns out that 9 is not a fixed number. You can actually increase seats if you'd like. There is a process in order to do that, and of course, certain presidents have used that process to do more seats and to actually make more appointments in order to swing the court. That's what's called packing the courts. And I believe there was a president that did a lot of important social programs that weren't going to be passed by the conservative Supreme Court. So he packed the courts, and we got things like Social Security and Medicare. That was FDR. Dude knew how to get shit done. My point is, maybe we could do that. But anyway, and it's funny because Republicans would scream bloody murder. But anyway, according to sources involved in the current judicial fight, the shift is backed up by recent internal polling that shows that voters are motivated to oppose Trump's pick not over process, but over substance, particularly around abortion rights, which also serves as a proxy for constitutional rights more generally. So basically, Grimm is making the argument that, look, Democrats, if you want to fight this, don't talk about the arcane process of whatever going on in the Senate. No, talk about how he's an extreme nominee. And that the decisions that he could face, that he could rule on, has a huge impact in all of our lives. And look, that's not a bad strategy. That's actually a great strategy. And I'm still in favor of doing both, but that's just me. Now, anyway, as far as Chuck Schumer, look, yes, is he being strong on this? Uncharacteristically so, which is why I do not have much hope. Chuck Schumer is not a strong leader, and he doesn't exactly have a unified Democratic caucus. For example, we've got Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, Joe Manchin, as well as Doug Jones. Oh boy. Now, here's the thing. If you actually want to effectively block Kavanaugh, well, you can't have any defections within the Democratic ranks. At all. None. So, now we get to, of course, Heitkamp, Donnelly, and Manchin. Now, those three Democrats actually voted to confirm Judge Neil Gorsuch. And they are all facing contentious elections in red states where Trump had won. And they've all said the same thing. We're going to hear him out. We're going to vet him on some of the different things like abortion rights. Oh no, here it comes. Oh no. So when they said we're going to give him a chance, that's not good. That's not good at all. Here comes Justice Kavanaugh. These Democrats are going to fold. They're going to fold. I swear to God, if they fold, I'm going to scream. Now, look. Now, here's the other thing. As I mentioned, the Democrats aren't a unified caucus. But on this issue, on this specific nominee, the Republicans are also not entirely unified. In fact, they've already lost John McCain. Now, John McCain, it's not that John McCain doesn't like Justice Kavanaugh. It's that John McCain has got cancer, and he's being treated, and he's not available for the vote. So, look, that's 50 votes. But they could also lose a couple. In fact, they could lose Suzanne Collins and Lisa Murkowski. Now, those are the moderate Republicans that are both very pro-choice. And they've said, we're not going to vote for somebody who's going to strike down abortion and reproductive rights. So, look, there is a possibility if no Democrats leave, and I'm looking at Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, and Joe Manchin. If they all stay firm, then, and we end up actually getting Lisa Murkowski or Suzanne Collins, well, then that's it. No more Judge Kavanaugh, right? But the Democrats, of course, you know how the corporate Democrats are, how the conservative Democrats are. They're going to fold. They're going to vote. And we're going to get this disastrous justice. I hope I'm wrong. Now, Grimm finally writes, in that vein, for Democrats to put up a united opposition, Schumer would have to corral Sens Joe Donnelly of Indiana, Joe Manchin of West Virginia, John Tester of Montana, Heidi Heitkamp of North Dakota, and Claire McCaskill of Missouri. And let me throw just Doug Jones in there, who also said, oh, no, I'm going to give him a fair shake. Don't worry about that. This is a guy who barely beat a pedophile. And has said, no, I'm open to working with Trump. I mean, he desperately wants to impress the right wing as a Democrat. So with all that, with those possible defections, there's more possible defections in the Democratic Party than there are the Republican Party. So that is a huge danger. So do I think that this is going to happen? Do I think that they're going to hold firm? No. I have little faith in these corporate Democrats. I've got little faith in Chuck Schumer. One of them, it just takes one defection and to vote for the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh. And he becomes Justice Kavanaugh. So, and look, Schumer cannot hold this together. Why? It's because he's a terrible leader. And I'm not the only one who thinks so. There was one Democratic senator. Now, this senator spoke on the condition of anonymity, right? As to not anger the Senate leader. He said Chuck has spent his entire career trying to make every one of his colleagues happy and telling them what they want to hear. There's no sense of leadership. It just feels as if everyone is in a big tent, just staying where they are, doing whatever they feel is in their best interests. That's Chuck Schumer's leadership style. Leadership style. Now, let me make one amendment to that. Yeah, no, they're doing what they feel is in their best interest. Or, of course, in the donor's best interest. That's why I have little faith. Okay? The Democratic Party will not stop Kavanaugh on their own. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they will actually resist. Or maybe, and this is basically my only hope here, is that people who are fed up with this, who are standing up for same-sex marriage rights and reproductive rights are going to put enough pressure on these right-wing Democrats to stop them from voting in favor of Judge Kavanaugh. So hopefully enough pressure will get it to where they don't fuck this up. Because if they do, it's going to be terrible. As one senior Democratic aide put it, quote, "If we don't put up a fight, there's going to be hell to pay." Well, that's true. Okay. I'm not done yet, so I guess more show for you guys. Let's keep going. Now, following the nomination of Justice Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court, Democrats have decided to come out swinging. Wow, that's a surprise. Even Chuck Schumer called on Senate Democrats to actually fight, or else it would be terrible electorally. It would be terrible for the base. The base would rebel. And look, I agree with that. I absolutely would. Now, progressive groups have also called to fight against Kavanaugh. The Progressive Change Campaign Committee, for example, immediately launched television ads highlighting Kavanaugh's stands in the states of two up-for-grabs GOP senators. That is Lisa Murkowski and Suzanne Collins. Now, those are possible no votes. Those are people that we could swing because of their stances on being on reproductive rights. Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski are actually pro-choice Republicans. Now, Trump's nominee, Kavanaugh, they say, is an extreme choice for the Supreme Court. Now, it summarizes Kavanaugh's key opinions, including employers should be able to eviscerate union rights, and presidents, including Trump, are above the law and should never be indicted. Another rotating summary in the ad calls the judge stealthy on abortion. So, basically, we don't know quite how he's going to roll on abortion. There was a previous ruling, over an immigrant teenager that wanted to get an abortion, and Kavanaugh railed against it, saying, "What? No, you shouldn't be able to. That should be the parents' decision." Okay, now these ads are blistering, and are going after Kavanaugh on policy positions that he has taken. So that's good. That's where you want to hit him. Now, in response, of course, Republicans do what Republicans do best. They cry. Mitch McConnell had urged his fellow senators to, quote, "put partisanship aside and consider the legal qualifications with the fairness, respect, and seriousness that a Supreme Court nomination ought to command." Oh. Put your partisanship aside, guys. Give him a fair shake. That's all we're asking. Well, that's funny. I remember Democrats asking Mitch McConnell to give Merrick Garland a fair shake. Did they do so? No, they did not. And it was Mitch McConnell that led the charge. Now, he also said about this, Kavanaugh is impressive and extremely well qualified to serve as in the Supreme Court. He says that he has a firm understanding of the role of a judge in our republic, setting aside personal views and political preferences in order to interpret our laws as they're written. No, what Kavanaugh is that he's an originalist, right? So he says that stuff like that has led to the rulings of, for example, same-sex marriage, Roe v. Wade, and even the case that stopped the government from banning contraception. what underpins that is basically illegal, right? That the arguments that were used in those cases, invalid. No, we got to go with the original meaning of the Constitution as it was written. Now, that, of course, also means that we can't have regulations on business. And that is something that Kavanaugh has routinely fought against. Environmental regulations, he's also fought against. And so anything that helps consumers or women or LGBT folks, you can be sure that Kavanaugh was on the wrong side of. And Republicans are like, we think that that's fantastic. We love this guy. Democrats, why won't you give him a fair shake? Now, he also said, this far-left rhetoric comes out every single time, in reference to, of course, to these ads. But the apocalypse never comes. Americans can see beyond this far-left mongering, this fear-mongering from the far left on Judge Brett Kavanaugh, on how he's so extreme. Well, he is extreme, and again, I've told you about his positions that are extremely anti-consumer and very, very corporate friendly. Now, that's not something the American people, I think, voted for. For more corporatism? No, this election was actually against the corporate establishment. It's funny how Trump and the Republicans have turned their back on what they ran on in order to, of course, help their corporate friends / donors. Now, you want to talk about fear-mongering, by the way. Well, that's what the Republican Party does 24/7. Oh, here come the Muslims. Oh, here come the Mexicans. They're coming across the border. They're taking your jobs. If that's not fear-mongering, I don't know what is. But the left actually pointing out what his rulings have been traditionally and saying that, look, man, this ruling could lead to possibly getting rid of same-sex marriage. Well, that's not fear-mongering. It's an opinion, but it's also based on factual information that we have from his previous rulings. So, anyway. Now, conservative groups, however, are pushing back, of course, on how they're doing so. Well, they're going to spend a buttload of money to try to push Kavanaugh. Now, conservative groups intend to spend vast amounts of money to flip red state Democrats in favor of Kavanaugh. Now, this is, of course, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, Joe Manchin. Those three voted for Judge Gorsuch, by the way, but there are other corporate Democrats, for example, Doug Jones, where they could possibly be flipped. And if there is one defection from the Democratic Party in favor of Kavanaugh, well then, here comes Justice Kavanaugh. So it's very, very important that Democrats hold firm. But unfortunately, as I said before in another segment, I don't believe that they're going to do so. Now, let me show you how much money how much pressure, I should say, is coming from conservatives. Now, the Judicial Crisis Network, it's a conservative group, has committed to spending about $2.4 million on TV and digital ads backing Kavanaugh. And their website, confirmkavanaugh.com, went live shortly after Trump's announcement. The group poured $10 million into promoting Gorsuch's nomination and will probably spend just as much this time. They're joined by a network of Koch brothers-backed groups planning to spend at least $1 million on the confirmation battle. So immediately, they put out the call, we need the money, and here comes the money. Now, in addition to the money, Republicans are also trying to use the Democrats' attack against him. Now, get this. They're insisting that Kavanaugh is not extreme. He's mainstream. He's a mainstream guy. I mean, he's got mainstream opinions, so I don't know what the Democrats are doing saying all this thing about him being so extreme. But in reality, he is extreme. And look, he would actually be one of the most conservative judges on the court. And is just as pro-corporate, if not more, than Justice Gorsuch. They also say that Democratic resistance is just so unfair. I mean, why are you going and attacking this this mainstream guy, this man with great credentials and a strong record of upholding the Constitution. In fact, John McCain, who cannot be there for the vote, did release a statement. He said, Judge Brett Kavanaugh has impeccable credentials and a strong record of upholding the Constitution. He is widely respected as a fair and independent and mainstream judge. I look forward to the Senate moving forward with a fair and thorough confirmation process. It's kind of funny because, look, Democrats in there who actually was a mainstream judge. Well, okay, he was centrist judge. Mainstream, I think, to me has a different connotation. If you're mainstream, then you kind of have to be with the American people. But that's just what I believe it should be. And look, Merrick Garland was not with the American people on a lot of other issues. For example, the issue of money in politics. He voted in favor of money in politics. So, I'm just saying. Not exactly mainstream. And neither is Kavanaugh. But anyway, Democrats did not get their choice. They did not get a fair and thorough confirmation process. They didn't get any confirmation process. None. They just let him sit in limbo. And that's it. Now, look, of course, the Republican argument against that is, look, it's an election year. It's 2016. You can't just put up a president or put up a nomination, a Supreme Court nominee during an election year. No, you should wait till the American people have their voice and make their voice known through the election. And then we'll see if we can confirm that justice. Well, here's the thing. 2018 is also an election year. We've got an enormous midterm coming up. So, look, if it was a big election then, big enough to stop a Supreme Court nomination, well then, 2018 should be big enough to stop a nomination too, right? Unless, of course, you're hypocritical. There's more. Another conservative, Brett Stevens, who's an NBC contributor, told MSNBC Stephanie Ruhle, also very conservative, that Democrats should cave on Kavanaugh and, quote, win on issues where they can make a difference. Quote, I think Kavanaugh should be confirmed 100-0. The point is, you have a well-qualified judge who's in the broad mainstream of the American movement. Doesn't have any moral disqualifiers. You should go back to the American tradition when we had recently, as recently as Sandra Day O'Connor, she was confirmed 99-0. Well, it would be nice to go back to that, where all justices get a fair hearing. But as I mentioned before, Merrick Garland did not get a fair hearing. He actually had the seat stolen from him by Mitch McConnell. Now, we're not going to sit there and play fair when you punch us in the face. We're done with that. The Republicans want to play unfair. They want to play dirty. Well, we can play dirty too. Okay? Because no more of this, when they go low, we go high. No, we go low too and punch them in the face. Figuratively, of course, not literally. I'm not advocating for actual violence here. But what we should do is that we should use their own tactics against them so that we might actually win. One of those tactics, I think, would be pack the courts. Fine. You know what? If somehow we do get a Justice Kavanaugh, pack the freaking courts. You want to play it this way? You want to steal a seat? Okay. Well, two can play at that game. That's just me. But no. Republicans will say that's so untoward. How dare you? How dare you? In fact, Stevens said, Democrats are going to lose on this issue, and it's going to make them seem extreme and petty. So extreme, so petty. That's Democrats for you. Really. Now, Stevens, of course, is a conservative. He writes for the the Wall Street Journal. Now, I wonder if any of his articles mention, go back to 2016, if any of those articles mention that the blocking of Merrick Garland, I wonder if he called any of that petty or extreme. Very curious. Look, these are the kinds of attacks we're seeing from Republicans, right? Make no mistake, Kavanaugh isn't the mainstream. He's deeply conservative. He's incredibly pro-corporate. Now, and unfortunately, there's going to be too many Democrats that will end up voting for him that are also conservative corporate Democrats. And that, it doesn't matter if the Democratic Party, leadership tries to corral these Democrats. No, it's because they can't wait to be lauded by the right wing. People like Joe Manchin can't wait to have the right wing say, good boy, you helped us out, you served us, you served your role. They're going to call it historic. But it's not. It's gross and incredibly hypocritical. Okay. One more here. So we've seen a lot of instances of white people calling the cops on black people for basically doing normal things. I mean, for example, you had a black family that was, that had the police called on them for grilling in a grilling zone inside of a park. Now, a black child's neighbors also called the police on him when he was mowing the lawn. Recently, a 12-year-old had the police called on him for delivering papers because he has a paper route. So this is something that's been happening quite a few times. Apparently, there are white people out there who think that, no, I'm entitled to call the cops on a black person if I feel uncomfortable, even if they're not actually doing anything wrong. Well, there was another instance of this happening at a public pool. Now, a woman who called the police on a black man for, get this, the crime of wearing socks at a pool has been fired from her job. So finally, we get a little bit of justice. Now, the person who was fired is Erica Walker. Now, she was employed by Trilogy Residential Management, where she was a manager of one of the company's apartment developments in Memphis, Tennessee. Now, on the 4th of July, she confronted a woman named Camry Porter. Now, Camry Porter is a resident of the apartment development, and her boyfriend who was at the pool. Now, when she was there, Erica decided to go after Camry's boyfriend for wearing socks at the pool. But wait, okay, take off your socks. Why? I'm not going to take off my socks. I'm wearing socks. It's not like I'm going inside the pool. Then, of course, maybe you would think, okay, take off your socks if you're going to go in the pool because you're going to make the pool dirty. But why would you wear socks in the pool at all? And since when is it a crime to wear socks when you're not in the pool, at the pool? It doesn't make any sense. But, of course, after he politely declined, Walker decided to call the police on him. Now, of course, there was video about this that caught the attention of a lot of news outlets, as a lot of these videos have done. And yet, Porter says that she felt that she and her boyfriend were discriminated against because it wasn't actually about the socks. She said, it's 25, 30 plus white people out here and you haven't said anything. You're partying with them. But when we come, it's an issue. After a call to the police went viral and garnered national attention, the company did say that Walker will, quote, never be employed by Trilogy Residential Management or any of its properties in the future. So again, here we have social media, right, that highlights something that is grossly wrong and messed up. I mean, again, who goes after somebody for wearing socks at the pool and calls the cops? Which, by the way, is potentially dangerous for people who have the police called on them. But it follows another example, as I said before, of all these different instances of this being caught on tape. Because you can be sure that before people started videotaping this stuff, it actually happened all the time. And of course, a lot of us who didn't realize it before, it's because it's never happened to us. And that's part of white privilege. And so, look, in my years of being alive, I've never had anything like this happen to me. Never had somebody call the cops on me for just doing something that's normal. But in a lot of situations that you think are seemingly normal, if you're a black person, well then to some people it's not normal, it's suspicious behavior. I mean, think about the police officer who was gathering evidence from a crime scene and somebody called the cops on him. Well, this was somebody who's dressed up in a police uniform shining lights in people's houses. He was gathering shell casings from a crime scene. But he's doing something incredibly suspicious. No, he's a police officer. And you still called the cops on him. The things that we take for granted that we can do as white people in America, there is a section of people who can't. And these stories are showing just how much that is true. But thankfully, in this case, there's some sort of justice. Yes, these people, look, I'm weird about people losing their jobs, but in this case, look, if you're not treating everybody fairly and equally who come to your pool, then you shouldn't be a manager of a pool. If you have these racial biases and you don't realize them and you don't do anything to curb them, because we all have a bias, well then maybe you shouldn't be in that position. Or maybe you should learn so that you could actually do your job better. But anyway, there is some measure of justice. There is a measure of things being rectified. And so I guess at the end of the day, it's good that we have these videos coming out, and it's good that people are actually learning that this happens. So maybe this cannot happen again. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for joining me. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share if you haven't. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel and becoming a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. All right. Massively out of time. Thank you for joining. And we'll see you guys tomorrow, same time, same place, right here, TYT Nation. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. Love you guys. See you tomorrow.
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.